I am here with Shirley Jackson. Oh, here we go. The good thing is I've learned how to edit these things as well, so I
Yeah.
can cut out the front. All right, here we go.
Unless do you want to try and get it, like, remake the call? Do you think that'll make a difference, or just keep going?
We're good. It started. Yeah, it's all good. All right. 1, 2, 3, go. I'm here with Shirley Jackson, award-winning Kaaron Warren, who published her first short story in 1993 and has had fiction in print every year since. She has recently given the Peter McNamara Lifetime Achievement Award and was guest of honor at World Fantasy in 2018, StokerCon 2019, and GeyserCon in 2019. Kaaron was a fellow at the Museum for Australian Democracy, where she researched prime ministers, artists, and serial killers. She has published 5 multi-award winning novels: Slights, Walking the Tree, Mystification, The Grief Hole, and Tide of Stone, and 7 short story collections, including the multi-award winning Through Splintered Walls. She has won the ACT Writers and Publishers Award 4 times and twice been awarded the Canberra Critics Circle Award for fiction. Her most recent novel, Into the Bones Like Oil, by Murky Press, is on the final ballot for the Horror Writers Association Stoker Award in Superior Achievement in Non-Fiction. So congratulations on making the ballot. Kaaron, you are coming to us from Canberra in Australia. My first question to get the interview going is, what are the restrictions like in Canberra as far as the pandemic is gone, and how does that affect your life and other folks in Canberra?
Yeah, well, look, we're similar to where a lot of the rest of the world, I think. We're on lockdown, which means a lot of the shops are shut. Certainly the shop, I work 2 days a week in a second-hand shop where we sell antique items and bric-a-brac and all sorts of things, and that's not open at the moment. And my husband's working from home because they're concerned about public transport and all that sort of thing. So, yes, very, very similar in that way. And restrictions on shopping hours because of this madness that went on with the panic buying. We've got restricted shopping hours at our local supermarket, which seems to be working okay. They've got the first hours for elderly people, which I think is really good. Mind you, they've got to get up really early because it's from 7 till 8. So they've got to go shopping nice and early. But yeah, so it has been affecting us the same as it has everybody, I suppose. And it's the social stuff that I think can be the hardest in a lot of ways. Not being able to get together with friends and all that sort of thing.
Were the Aussies doing the same thing as we hear Americans and Brits are doing, running out to go and get toilet paper?
Yes. There's some evidence to say that the Australians started that. I don't know if that's true or not. No, it's crazy. Like, really, well before we were in lockdown, well before we even really had a lot of cases here, they were being cleared out. The shelves were just being cleared out. And you didn't believe it until you got up there and you went, oh, right, there's no toilet paper. I want to figure out what the new name for the expression on someone's face when they do get some toilet paper, because there's a certain look, like you're proud, you feel like you've hunted down something, you're relieved. Like it's a particular look on someone's face, and you know they've got toilet paper in that shopping bag.
I mean, it's funny until we don't have it, and it's one of those things that you always expect to have, but when there's a shortage, it does become a bit of a panic. So
yes,
we do get it. So how about personally? Have you and your husband ever, worked full time from the house together? The close quarters, is this creating a new dynamic that you want to share with us a little bit about?
Oh, look, it's hard. Luckily we get along very well. We've been together 30 years, and we get along. We've ironed out all of the, the big arguments and all that sort of stuff long since past, I think. But yeah, it's tricky because he's got a reasonably high level government job, so he really does have to stay focused on his stuff during the day and lots of phone calls and all that sort of stuff. But we've got a really good sized house, so we've got lots of different spaces to move around into. And no, it's not a massive house, but it's a big enough house. I've got, the room I'm in now is what we call the sunroom. And I've got a little study that I go to, and he's quite happy working on the kitchen table because he's used to having office and noise around him. So it's tricky though. Like it is hard. to stay focused. I've got both my kids. They're both grown, 21 and 19, so pretty much grown up. But they're both here at the moment, and you kind of, in a lovely way, revert back to them being our kids, kind of thing. So I'm enjoying that, but at the same time, it means it's hard for me to do that switch to being Kaaron, the horror writer. I'm kind of going back to making pikelets in the afternoons, doing all that sort of stuff, which is really lovely, and I'm actually loving it a lot. But at the same time, I'm remembering what it was like to have to do that switch between Kaaron, the mother, and Kaaron, the horror writer. And that can be really hard.
Sure. And have you got any works in progress that you need to sequester yourself in part of the house and get into your headspace to be the horror writer and not allow all these other distractions to be away?
I really do. And I'm actually thinking one of the things that I've done during this time is clean out. We've got a shed out the back, which I've been meaning to clean out and sort for a long time. And I actually got to that in the first or second week we were home. So there's space out there. And I was actually thinking I really probably need to go out to the shed to get into this space, because here really we've got, it's just, I don't know, it's very pleasant inside at the moment, I guess, and it can be quite hard to get into that space. I've got a couple of short stories. I'm in the middle of a novel that I'm working on, and I've got a couple of film things that are happening, so I need to sort of get stuck into those. So really, really, really hard. One of the stories I'm working on is for an anthology called Spawn, SPAWN, which is horror stories about birth and childbirth and all that sort of thing. And that one I'm getting there, but I am finding it really, really hard to get into that horror space. Yes. So I will. But today I'm thinking I'll go and I'll sit out in the shed and see how that goes.
Some of our fellow horror writers have mentioned they've got to be very disciplined to shut off the notifications on their computer. Because as things come across from the different news, either economic or health or anything else, they tend to get distracted from this, and then got to work hard to get back into the headspace to get creative again. Do you find that to be a problem, or can you just blanket off and shut off everything?
No, I'm really bad. In fact, my daughter's one is saying, turn off the internet, Mum. You're not going to get anything done while you've got your internet running. And she's exactly right, because it is all of that. And the reality of it is so terrifying, really, isn't it? It is very scary. Like I'm in my little safe place, kind of, to a large extent, but there's so much going on that is absolutely terrifying. And so very hard to write fictional horrors when the real horrors are so close. So really, it's not a good way. I really do need to try to separate from that in order to get into that fictional space that you have to inhabit, don't you? Like you can't inhabit your fictional space in a surface way and write the sort of story needs to be written.
It's not like the Aussies have had an easy go of it. You've had all those horrible fires not too many months ago. Would any of that affect you in Canberra at all?
Not so much in Canberra, though. We did have it coming close. Like we're kind of right in the middle of a whole lot of bush in Canberra. And at one stage near the end there, we had 3 or 4 fires that were all coming at us. And one really, really massive fire out of control that burnt so much of our national forest. It's absolutely heartbreaking. And that was definitely affected. I had friends who were living in that area and they were definitely packed up, ready to go. They definitely were ready to leave at a moment's notice, and quite a few of them would spend nights elsewhere just in case, because that's how close it was. But my parents down the coast, they live down the south coast, which you would have driven through, actually, I think, when you did your trip in Australia.
Yep. Yeah.
You actually would have probably driven near where they live. So that was terrifying for them, actually. They're in their 80s and they did lose not their house, but all of their surrounds, so water tank and sewage tank, and their whole big shed burnt down. I haven't actually processed all of that yet. Their huge big shed, which had, like, basically, they have moved since I was a child, but a lot of our childhood memories and art and books and all sorts of things were in this shed, and that's all gone. So I haven't actually quite processed all of that yet, which needs to happen in my fiction probably at some stage as well as in real life. But yeah, so we really had not in any way recovered, and we're still not recovered from all of that. Like, they're still not living at home, and there are still people living in caravans down there, and so all of that part of it is definitely still going on. But now we've got this slightly more at the moment urgent thing
Right.
happening.
Yeah. Well, let's put all the real horrors behind, and let's talk about into bones like oil. Um, Give us a little bit of your inspiration, your motivation for writing it. Tell us as much as you can tell us about it, and certainly show us the cover of the book as well. Now's your time to kind of shine on this, because you're not going to be able to do it in Scarborough. Give it to us now.
No, no, it's just such a shame. It's so sad that won't be all happening. But anyway, postponed. Yeah, so this is it's a novella, obviously, and it's one that I realised as I started to talk about it in interviews, etc. It's actually been cooking away in me for probably about 25 years or more. It's one of these real slow burners. Something I've wanted to write for a long time. The setting is a rooming house by the sea, which is of course haunted. And when the residents go to sleep, the ghosts speak through them. And the man who runs the rooming house basically records these voices and writes them down and sells the book. So he's profiting from these ghostly voices that are coming through the mouth. So the residents will wake up and their throats will be sore and they won't have remembered any of it. But they've been a funnel, I guess, for the ghosts' voices. So that's the basic idea of the story. But the setting is a rooming house, which has been sitting there, and I've been wanting to write a story set in a rooming house, and I have done a couple of variations, but this is the one that really, really cracked it. I stayed in one about 25 years ago with my husband, who was my boyfriend then, but now my husband. And we stayed there about a week. We went down to Melbourne for a wedding, and for some reason we decided to stay in this place. And it obviously had an incredible effect on me for a number of reasons, I think. Because we stayed there a week, it wasn't just a night or two. We became regulars in that time. Like a week in a place like this is long enough for you to become one of the regulars. Because people do settle very quickly there, that sort of thing. And I was just really struck by the people who were living there. Some of them were just there for the night or two. Some of them had been there for months. And it's a really transient sort of a life. And it struck me that it was the sort of place that it's the last place you go before you give up altogether and say that I can't, I've actually failed at life and I'm not going to do this anymore. But the people there are still hanging on. They've still got jobs of one sort or another. And it was just, it was very effective on me, I think, in lots of ways, because it was the sort of place that I could have been, I guess, if I'd made different choices. Is it one of these, you can see people have made choices that you maybe could have made in your life, and then you would have been in this circumstance rather than, with somebody who was your best friend and, who you felt very lucky to be with and you had a good job and all that sort of thing. So that's one part of it. And then the other part is that I'd been gathering stories about rooming houses over the years as well, where people, they say last seen near a rooming house, like young girls in particular would disappear, and the last place they were seen was near a rooming house. No explanation of why they were there or who else was inside this place, but just the fact that it's almost anonymous. Like, no, everybody can have whatever name they want in these houses, and that comes through in the book. A lot of people have fake names or names that they've given themselves, that sort of thing. So in a place like that, you can be whoever you want to be. So yeah, I was gathering stories for that as well, and I realised a lot of the characters are ones I've collected over the years as well, of people who I thought, well, they actually would live in this rooming house. Oh, that person, an element of that, the way that woman just walked across the quadrangle, she would be in this rooming house, and that man, how tall he is, and what he's wearing. So I've been gathering stories and ideas and people to people it for a long time as well. And then, I don't know how it finally came to be the right time to write it, but then it was. And then, luckily Meerkat were the ones who I sent it to, because she was the perfect publisher for it, I think.
Well, that's a great story. It's so cool when there's something that's burning inside you for so long, and in between other projects. And it sounds like from your introduction, you've got a lot of things that you've done successfully over the years, but this one has just been waiting for its chance to get center stage and to be fleshed out.
Yes, yeah, and I didn't quite realise that. Like, I just knew it was there, and I would find little notes to myself every now and then. Oh, there was this rooming house note, etc. And there's so many of them, so many girls, really young girls, disappearing close to rooming houses. So I always knew it was going to happen. And yeah, the details of the place that we stayed in, and they have this like breakfast. They often include breakfast, but it's bacon and eggs, or it's baked beans on toast, and it's that sort of thing. But it's the place where people get together in a social kind of way, and it's often the only social interactions people have in the whole day. So it becomes really important how you speak to people and what you get from them and that sort of thing.
So
it reminds me a little bit. Have you ever seen the movie or seen the play called Separate Tables? It's a really, really old one, like black and white. Terence Rattigan is the playwright. It's this, it's a totally heartbreaking story about loneliness more than anything else. Set in a British coastal town on the off season, and there's all these single people, all these lonely people who are going there. They can't afford to go during the summer, so they go during the winter when it's very miserable and whatever. And they all sit at separate tables and they'll talk to each other, and it's wonderful. So I think a little element of that probably worked its way through the mood of the story as well.
If that book was sitting on the bookcase or on a table in the rooming house that you and your husband stayed at, and the owner picked it up, started reading it, would they realize that was the model for it? Is it that person obvious?
Not this one. I have written a short story that that's been one of these doomed short stories that I've sold, I think, 3 or 4 times, and then the publisher shuts down, so I'll promise not to send it out to anybody because I don't want to shut anybody else down. But that is really, like, they would definitely recognise themselves in that, because they were such an interesting couple who ran it. He was this tiny little, very dapper, precisely dressed man, and she was this tall blonde, I think she was Danish or something, and she had very tight little pants and high heels, and she'd prounce around like this, and he'd follow her around, and so I think they would recognise themselves in that story. But yeah, like I said, it's kind of it's a cursed story, so I've stopped sending it out because I feel too bad about about publications shutting down once I send it to them.
Kaaron, there's a final question, but before we do that, I've just got to say best of luck. April 18th, even though we all won't gather in Scarborough for StokerCon UK, this will be streamed. The award ceremony will be streamed. So best of luck with Into Bones Like Oil. But what I do want to end with, and I thank you for your insight, is with all of this going on, and the household with your children, your husband, and your cat, is there any silver lining? Have you learned anything about yourselves because of this isolation that you thought, this is not so bad after all, or maybe this is pretty cool? Any silver linings to pass on to your listeners?
Look, I think that's a really good question. It's important to try and find the positives, isn't it? Definitely. Look, we're actually enjoying each other as a family, and and we've realised that we are actually good to each other, and so to a certain extent, we're actually enjoying being home together. We get along. We really do get along well. We can't make decisions we keep saying, let's have a movie day today, and we can't decide on the movie. That hasn't changed. I want to try and show them some old classic Australian movies, like Wake in Fright. The original Australian version is just fantastic, and things like that. But no, it's actually been good. And clearing out the shed was fantastic for me. That was really cathartic, and I got rid of lots of stuff, but I also found things that I thought were lost, and got out. Actually, one of the wonderful things was that I had sorted through lots of pictures and paintings that we had sort of stacked there that I couldn't get to. And my mum lost. She's a wonderful artist, like an amazing artist, and she lost probably 70 to 80% of her paintings in the shed when it burnt in the fires.
Ooh,
I know.
Well, you may be able to replace some of those.
Yes, there's a few there. There's one in particular, a Raggedy Ann doll that she painted for me when I was probably 5 or 6 years old, and that was in the shed. So that's still there. So that was really good. She doesn't like to think about it too much, about what's been lost. She's one of these people that doesn't like to think about what's lost. She wants to think about what's been gained, which is a good way to be in lots of ways. But yeah.
It is. Well, Kaaron, thank you for your time today. And once again, best of luck on April 18th. And
thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you so much. It's been great talking to you.
You're most welcome.